Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always believed that I was a dedicated husband and a caring father, someone who put his family first and strove to create a warm, loving home. For years, I poured my heart into every little detail, whether it was preparing breakfast on busy mornings or fixing broken furniture with my own two hands, and I thought Hannah appreciated it all. Lately, though, I began to notice a different side to her. At first, it was subtle, a sarcastic comment here, a dismissive smile there. But as time went on, her words grew sharper, and I felt increasingly small, as if my efforts were nothing more than a joke to her. One crisp Saturday afternoon, during a family gathering at a local park, I tried to share a story about the handmade bookshelf I'd spent weeks crafting. As I recounted the tale, Hannah interrupted me in front of our relatives with a light, mocking laugh. "Oh, honey, you really think that old piece of wood is going to impress anyone?" she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I felt my face flush, and an uncomfortable silence fell over the group as curious eyes shifted between us. Inside, my thoughts screamed, "Is this how you truly see me?" I had spent countless hours perfecting that bookshelf, and now it was reduced to a punchline in her eyes. I struggled to keep my composure, but the sting of her words echoed long after the laughter died down. In the days that followed, the pattern became unmistakable. Whether we were out to dinner with friends or simply spending an ordinary evening at home, Hannah would casually dismiss my accomplishments and highlight my flaws in front of others. One evening, while our children were tucked into bed, she remarked, "Eric, I just can't understand how you manage to keep the house together without any real skills. I mean, even a beginner could do half of what you do." I sat in the dim light of our living room, the weight of her words settling into every fiber of my being. I remembered the smiles of our children and the quiet moments of togetherness, and wondered if they ever noticed the silent degradation that had become a part of my everyday life. Was I too complacent? Was I letting her demean me simply to keep the peace? The internal conflict was unbearable, and I found myself questioning my self-worth. Late one night, after the kids had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. I replayed every humiliating moment in my mind, each joke, each dismissive remark, and realized that I had been suffering in silence far too long. My thoughts churned with questions. Why would someone I loved so deeply reduce me to a mere accessory in her grand performance? Why had I allowed this to continue without speaking up? I could feel a deep, simmering anger beginning to take shape, even as the sorrow of betrayal threatened to overwhelm me. As I washed a dish, the clinking sound echoed like a final reminder of every careless word she had uttered. In that quiet moment, I decided that I could no longer let her actions erode my identity. I resolved that if I were to reclaim even a fraction of my lost pride, I needed to confront this painful reality head-on. That night, as I lay in bed, I silently vowed that the next time Hannah raised her voice in mockery, I would find the strength to stand up for myself, no matter the cost. I drifted into a troubled sleep with one thought echoing in my mind. The time for silent suffering was over, and a new chapter of my life was about to begin. The next evening, I found myself at a well-attended dinner on the cruise, a lavish affair held in one of the ship's grand ballrooms, where soft lights and elegant music set an almost surreal backdrop to what would become a turning point in my life. I had hoped that this gathering with close friends might offer a temporary escape from the gnawing anxiety of recent events, but from the moment I stepped in, the atmosphere was tinged with a tension I couldn't ignore. The table was set with sparkling glassware and gleaming silverware, and laughter filled the air as everyone exchanged pleasantries. I sat next to a few acquaintances, trying to keep my mind off the gnawing doubts that had plagued me for weeks. Yet, the more I tried to blend into the background, the more I noticed Hannah's calculated glances and sly remarks. Halfway through the meal, as the conversation turned to the marvels of our respective careers, she leaned in with a casual air that sent a chill down my spine. "Isn't it adorable?" she said loud enough for several people at the table to hear. How Eric still clings to his old-fashioned tech gadgets? I mean, he's so sweet with his outdated software tricks. A ripple of laughter followed her comment, and I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. The words stung sharply, not because of the subject itself, but because they reduced every sacrifice I'd made to support our family and our life to a mere punchline. I tried to ignore it, my inner voice screaming that I deserved respect. Yet the mocking tone in her eyes made it impossible to bury the hurt. As the evening wore on, Hannah's jabs became more pointed, and I found myself growing increasingly agitated. Every mention of my work, every joke about my tech geek persona, was a reminder of how she had twisted my dedication into an object of ridicule. The conversation drifted from casual banter to thinly veiled insults, and when a friend offhandedly remarked, "I never knew Eric was so quaint," I felt something inside me snap. I had tried for so long to maintain a calm facade, to be the patient husband, but that night, the weight of every humiliation reached its boiling point. I stood up abruptly, the sound of my chair scraping against the polished floor echoing in the suddenly silent room. "Hannah," I said, my voice resonating with a mix of pain and resolve. "Enough is enough." A hush fell over the table, every eye turning to witness what was unfolding. "You've made a game out of my life, turning every effort I make into a joke," I continued, each word laced with years of pent-up sorrow. "I supported you, celebrated your successes, and all the while, you belittled me in front of everyone. I'm not here to be your entertainment." For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Hannah's eyes widened in shock, and even our friends sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to react. "Eric, you're overreacting," she stuttered, her tone wavering between indignation and desperation. "It was just a bit of fun, nothing serious." But I couldn't let her downplay the gravity of her words any longer. "Fun," I echoed bitterly. "Every time you mock my work, every time you laugh at my expense, you chip away at the dignity I've built for our family. I have had enough of being the butt of your jokes." The tension in the room was palpable as I scanned the faces of our guests. Some looked sympathetic, others uncomfortable, and a few even seemed to share my silent anger. As I sank back into my chair, the adrenaline still coursing through me, I realized that tonight had irrevocably altered something fundamental in our relationship. I felt both a surge of liberation and a profound sadness for what we had become. A marriage where my sacrifices were twisted into sources of ridicule, and my very identity was reduced to a mere accessory to her vanity. In the quiet that followed my outburst, I stared down at my hands and wondered if I would ever be able to reclaim the respect I once had. With my heart pounding and the room still heavy with silence, I knew that something had to change, and that change had started right there at that dinner table. Late one evening, as I was tidying up our modest cabin on the cruise, I found myself drawn into a mystery I never saw coming. I had been sorting through a cluttered drawer in our small stateroom office, trying to organize travel brochures and forgotten documents, when a small, worn leather pouch slipped out from beneath a stack of itineraries. I paused, my heart beginning to pound as I picked it up with trembling fingers. The pouch, embossed with a design that looked both elegant and mysterious, beckoned me to open it. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, lay an exquisite silver bracelet studded with tiny, glimmering diamonds. The brilliance of the stones caught the dim overhead light, casting delicate reflections on my hands. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that sent a chill down my spine. It was the inscription on the back. Etched into the metal was a name I didn't recognize, a name that was not mine, nor a name I had ever heard in our conversations about family or travel. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the bracelet clutched tightly as a heavy realization began to settle in. Hannah, my beloved wife, had always been an adventurous travel blogger, boasting about free VIP upgrades and exclusive experiences on our trips. She claimed to be busy reviewing the ship's luxury amenities. Yet this lavish gift was far beyond anything I could have imagined was meant for me. A storm of emotions erupted inside me. Shock, anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness. "What is this?" I whispered into the silence of the cabin, my voice barely audible over the sound of the ship's engines. Every past whisper of a secret phone call, every hushed conversation when I thought she wasn't listening, and every unexplained absence flashed before my eyes. It all converged into one undeniable truth. Hannah was hiding something, and it wasn't just about working late. As I examined the bracelet more closely, I remembered the moments when she would quickly end our phone conversations, the way her eyes would dart away whenever I mentioned her late-night outings. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and with each thought, the sting of her deception deepened. My hands shook, not just with anger, but with the sorrow of a love that had been reduced to lies and half-truths. I felt as though the ground beneath me was shifting, and for the first time in a long while, I questioned whether the life I had built with her was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. The realization was painful, yet it also ignited a spark within me. I resolved that I could no longer allow myself to be a silent victim of this betrayal. Instead of confronting her in a burst of uncontrolled emotion, I decided to gather every shred of evidence I could find to understand the full extent of her infidelity. I must know the truth, I muttered to myself, my voice a mix of anger and determination as I carefully wrapped the bracelet in tissue paper and placed it into a secure envelope. I knew that this piece of evidence, small yet damning, was only the beginning. I began to mentally map out the steps I would take, reviewing her recent texts, re-examining our travel itineraries, and even contemplating discreet surveillance to catch her in the act. Every detail, every minute discrepancy in her story would be scrutinized until I had a complete picture of the betrayal that had infiltrated our lives. As the ship gently rocked beneath me, I moved to the small desk by the window, where I set the envelope aside among scattered notes and plans. I looked out at the endless dark sea, its waves whispering secrets of their own, and felt an unexpected surge of resolve. I realized that my journey was about more than just uncovering Hannah's deception. It was about reclaiming my own dignity and the truth that I deserved. With the night growing deeper and my mind a whirlwind of painful memories and determined plans, I promised myself that I would not let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would transform this moment of discovery into the catalyst for change, gathering every bit of evidence until the full extent of her secret life was laid bare. And so, as I closed the envelope and secured it in a locked drawer, I knew that the time for silent suffering was over, and the path toward justice had begun. After that crushing discovery, I knew I couldn't let Hannah's betrayal go unpunished. The shimmering evidence of her secret rendezvous with the cruise ship's captain had ignited a fire in me, a determination to reclaim my dignity and expose the lies that had shattered our marriage. Every sleepless night following the revelation, I sat before my computer in the dim light of my cabin, fingers hovering over the keyboard, as I began to craft a plan that was as intricate as it was calculated. I was a software developer by trade, and I decided to put my skills to work. I meticulously hacked into the ship's guest announcement system and secured access to the security cameras. Every digital breadcrumb, every time-stamped video clip was stored and organized into a folder I labeled evidence. I could almost hear the clicking of keys echoing my resolve as I traced Hannah's every move. The digital trail confirmed everything. Her clandestine trips to the captain's private quarters, the secretive glances exchanged in the dead of night, and the unmistakable thrill in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. I couldn't help but feel a bitter satisfaction as the footage revealed her indiscretions in crystal-clear detail. Late one night, as I reviewed the security feed, I whispered to myself, "This is for every lie you told, every promise you broke." My heartbeat thumped in my ears as I imagined the captain's gala, a prestigious event, the pinnacle of elegance on this cruise, where I would finally unleash the truth. I started preparing for that night with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. I fine-tuned my system to seamlessly integrate the security footage into the ship's projector system, ensuring that every frame would play at the exact moment the captain began his speech. I rehearsed every step in my head, how I would navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the ship under the guise of concerned guest, how I would ensure that no one could trace my actions back to me. One evening, while I was finalizing the digital timeline, my friend and fellow traveler, Mark, joined me in the quiet solitude of the ship's library. "Eric," he said, lowering his voice, "you seem different these days. What's going on?" I hesitated, the weight of my secret plan pressing down on me. "I'm just tired of being overlooked," I replied, though I knew it was much more than that. Mark's knowing look said he suspected more, but he said nothing. The plan was set in motion, and each day brought me closer to the moment of reckoning. I spent hours perfecting every detail, from verifying the security camera timestamps to double-checking that the hack system wouldn't leave any trace of my interference. I even discreetly monitored the captain's schedule, ensuring that the footage would be projected during the gala when the entire elite of the cruise was watching. Every technical detail, every line of code I wrote, was a small act of rebellion against the deceit that had ruined my life. As I prepared for the captain's gala, the anticipation built within me like a crescendo of repressed pain and determination. I felt the electric thrill of imminent justice, knowing that soon the truth would be laid bare for everyone to see. My plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the self-respect that had been stolen from me, about showing Hannah that her web of lies would no longer hold me captive. I sat back in my cabin, the gentle hum of the ship's engines in the background, and allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction. "Tonight, everything changes," I murmured softly, my eyes fixed on the screen displaying the final version of the evidence. In that moment, I was no longer the silent, humiliated husband. I was a man taking control of his destiny, ready to dismantle the false facade that had defined my marriage for far too long. I had tracked Hannah's every move until I found her at a lavish restaurant on the ship, its opulent decor and shimmering chandeliers a stark contrast to the betrayal that now churned inside me. The atmosphere was elegant, with soft music and the low hum of hushed conversation. As I stepped through the grand entrance, my eyes locked onto a table where Hannah sat, her radiant smile a mask that couldn't hide the secret meeting unfolding before me. Across from her sat the cruise ship's captain, her lover, with a polished demeanor and a charm that seemed to complement her own. I could see them exchanging knowing glances, their conversation punctuated by gentle laughter and the discreet passing of a beautifully wrapped gift. Every affectionate gesture, every smile exchanged was a dagger to my heart, yet beneath the pain simmered a cold determination. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and moved toward their table with measured steps that betrayed neither hesitation nor fury. When I reached the table, the room's chatter seemed to dull as I turned toward the intrusion. "Hannah," I said, my voice steady yet laced with the gravity of the moment. Her eyes widened in shock, and the captain stiffened, his expression caught between disbelief and discomfort. "Eric, what are you doing here?" she stammered, attempting to salvage her composure. I sat down opposite them, my gaze unwavering. "I've come a long way to learn the truth," I said softly, letting each word carry the weight of all the silent years of humiliation. "You claimed you were busy reviewing the ship's luxury amenities, but I know you were busy with someone else, someone you trusted enough to share your secrets with." The captain's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the gift, his eyes darting to Hannah for an explanation. "Eric, you don't understand," she tried, her voice faltering. "Understand?" I interjected, my tone growing colder with every syllable. Every late-night call, every sudden disappearance, every carefully hidden secret, it all led to this moment. I have every piece of evidence, every timestamp clip from the security cameras, every digital trace of your deceit. I paused, letting the silence stretch, feeling the room hold its breath. "I trusted you, Hannah. I believed in us. But while I was working on our future, you were busy rewriting your story behind my back." Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of regret and anger swirling within them. "Eric, please, let's talk about this privately," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached out to him. I shook my head slowly, each movement deliberate. There's nothing left to discuss. The truth is now out in the open, and no amount of excuses or whispered apologies can erase it. I leaned back, my heart pounding with a mix of sorrow and vindication. I'm not here to tear you down. I'm here to reclaim my dignity. The captain, caught in the crossfire, mumbled something unintelligible, but I cut him off with a dismissive look. This isn't about you, I said sharply. This is about the betrayal of a woman who turned our home into a stage for her lies. A heavy silence descended over the table, and I saw that the grandeur of the restaurant could not mask the raw truth of the moment. I could feel the weight of every secret and every lie lifting from my shoulders as I realized that exposing her deception was not just an act of revenge, but a necessary step towards reclaiming who I was. With one final, measured glance at Hannah, a mixture of heartbreak and resolution etched on my face, I stood up. "Goodbye, Hannah," I said quietly, my voice a final farewell. As I walked away from the table, leaving behind the shocked whispers and the lingering stares of the other diners, a surge of victory and profound loss intertwined within me. I stepped out into the cool night air of the ship, feeling both the burden of a shattered past and the promise of a future finally unbound by deceit. After the chaos of the gala, I returned to my quiet cabin, the echoes of gasps and whispered accusations still ringing in my ears. The humiliation that had unfolded before hundreds of influential passengers lingered like a bitter aftertaste, but within that bitterness, I also felt the spark of liberation. I sat alone in the dim light of my cabin, staring out at the endless, dark sea, and tried to process the surreal events of the night. My heart still pounded from the adrenaline of the confrontation, yet a calm determination was beginning to take root. I knew that the storm was far from over, and as I tried to steady my racing thoughts, the sound of hurried footsteps approaching my cabin door jolted me back to the present. It swung open, and there stood Hannah, her eyes wild with anger and desperation. Her disheveled hair and frantic expression betrayed the image she had once so carefully curated in the VIP suite. "Eric," she began, her voice trembling between fury and a plea for understanding. "You can't do this to us. You've humiliated me in front of everyone." Her tone was desperate, as if trying to coax me back into a familiar embrace. I took a slow, deliberate breath, my mind still reeling from the events that had just transpired. "Hannah, the truth is out," I replied firmly, my voice steady despite the tumult inside me. "I exposed everything. You were caught red-handed in your deception, and now the entire ship knows." She stepped forward, her face contorting in anger. "You've overreacted, Eric. It was just a misunderstanding, a moment of poor judgment. We can fix this. We can salvage what we have." I shook my head slowly, my eyes never leaving hers. "Salvage? How can you salvage a lie that you've built from the ground up? Every time you claimed you were reviewing the luxury amenities, you were really sneaking off to see the captain. I trusted you, and you betrayed me in the most public way possible." Hannah's voice grew louder as she tried to defend herself. "You think you're so righteous now, don't you? You think your little act of revenge makes you better than me. But we're in this together. I did what I had to do." Her words fell flat in the heavy silence that followed, and I could see the desperation in her eyes, a mixture of regret and anger. "I'm done, Hannah," I said quietly but decisively, feeling the weight of every moment we had shared now reduced to ashes. "I can't live a lie, and I refuse to be gaslighted any longer." The tension in the cramped cabin was palpable, every second stretching into an eternity. I could feel the resolve hardening within me, a determination to reclaim my life and dignity at last. "Please, Eric, don't go," she pleaded softly, her voice breaking. "We can work this out. I need you." But I could no longer hear the familiar cadence of her manipulative pleas. "No, Hannah, I've seen the truth, and I can't unsee it. I've spent too long sacrificing my self-worth for your convenience, and tonight everything changed." The sound of my own voice, resolute and unwavering, marked the final break in our once trusted bond. Without waiting for another word, I gathered my few belongings, a jacket, a change of clothes, the small laptop that held my new plans, and stepped out into the cool, unyielding night. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the promise of a future defined by my own choices. I walked along the corridor, each step resonating with the certainty that I was finally free from the web of deceit. Outside, the ship's deck shimmered under the soft glow of moonlight, and I realized that I was not merely leaving a cabin. I was leaving behind a chapter of my life filled with lies and heartbreak. The cool night air filled my lungs, and with every step I took, I embraced the clarity of a new beginning, a life where my worth would be determined by truth, not by the illusion spun by someone I once loved. I walked into the law firm with a heavy heart and a steely resolve, knowing that the next steps would define the rest of my life. The lobby was quiet and unassuming, the muted tones of polished wood and soft lighting a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions inside me. I sat in the waiting area, the evidence I had meticulously gathered, screenshots of security footage, digital logs of every suspicious movement, and my personal diary of every degrading moment, securely stored on a flash drive in my pocket. When my lawyer, a seasoned attorney with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes, called me into his office, I felt a mixture of relief and determination. "Eric, I've reviewed everything," he began, his voice measured. "The evidence is irrefutable. We have a clear timeline of Hannah's actions that will dismantle her narrative in court." His words, cool and professional, resonated with the inner strength I had been forging over these painful months. As I recounted every humiliating episode, the public jabs at the gala, the secret discoveries, and the raw confrontation in our cabin, I could see my attorney's understanding grow. "We will present this as a case of systemic emotional abuse and deceit," he explained, tapping a folder filled with printed evidence. "Hannah's attempts to portray herself as the victim will crumble under the weight of these facts." Over the following days, I attended several meetings and preparatory sessions, each one feeling like a step toward reclaiming my self-respect. I watched as my lawyer cross-examined witnesses who had once been complicit in Hannah's web of lies, and I observed the shift in power dynamics as the truth began to emerge. In one critical session, during a pre-court hearing, the opposing counsel tried to paint me as a vengeful husband, twisting my actions as mere retaliation. "It appears you're using this process to settle personal scores," he sneered, his tone laced with disdain. I met his gaze steadily and replied, "I'm here for justice, not vengeance. The evidence speaks for itself. My actions are about reclaiming my dignity and exposing a pattern of deceit." The judge, listening intently, nodded slightly, and I felt a surge of vindication. That moment in the courtroom was pivotal. My calm resolve contrasted sharply with the desperation in Hannah's voice when she attempted to twist the narrative. At a subsequent meeting with my attorney, he laid out the strategy. Every piece of evidence would be presented in a timeline that left no room for interpretation. "We'll show the court that your so-called late nights and secret trips were not work-related, but a cover for your betrayal," he said. I listened, feeling the weight of each carefully documented detail, each fact a testament to the truth I had long awaited. Despite the emotional toll of revisiting every painful memory, I felt a growing confidence with each new piece of evidence added to my case file. I even began to see glimpses of hope in the way the courtroom proceedings unfolded, as the judge's questions became more pointed and the opposing counsel's arguments more desperate. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling hearing, I stepped out of the courthouse into the cool air, the sounds of the city a comforting backdrop. "We're on the right track," my lawyer assured me as we walked to his car, his tone firm and encouraging. "The truth is our strongest ally." I nodded silently, feeling that the final victory was within reach. Every day, as I reviewed my notes and relived the painful chapters of our marriage, I found strength in knowing that justice was not only possible but imminent. I had transformed from a silent victim into a man with a voice, a man who would no longer be defined by humiliation. With the legal battle now in full swing, I walked away from the courthouse that day with a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that while the road ahead was fraught with challenges, the truth, meticulously documented and irrefutably clear, would ultimately prevail. The journey toward justice had only just begun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that I was finally in control of my own destiny. I moved into a modest apartment in a quiet part of town, a stark contrast to the lavish but deceptive life I once knew aboard that ill-fated cruise. Each morning, I woke to the sound of birds outside my window and a renewed sense of possibility, a feeling that, after the storm of betrayal and public humiliation, I was finally reclaiming what was rightfully mine, my dignity and my future. I began to rediscover the simple joys that had long been overshadowed by the weight of deception. I brewed strong coffee in a battered but beloved kettle, sat at my worn wooden table, and allowed myself to imagine a life built on honest effort rather than lies. My days quickly filled with small acts of renewal. I reconnected with old friends in the neighborhood, joining a local carpentry workshop where I honed my skills and shared stories of hard-won triumphs and failures over hearty laughs and the occasional clink of tools. Each project, whether it was repairing a creaky chair or building a custom bookshelf, felt like an act of liberation, a tangible reminder that my hands and my heart could create something beautiful. One afternoon, while working on a rustic coffee table in the sunlit corner of my new workshop, my neighbor, Sam, stopped by. "Eric, you look different these days," he said with a friendly smile as he admired my work. "You got that spark back, the one I always knew was there." His words warmed me, confirming that my efforts to rebuild were bearing fruit. Evenings, once steeped in bitter solitude, became moments of quiet joy. I spent time with my children, who, sensing the change in their father, filled the apartment with laughter and playful banter. We'd gather around the dinner table to share stories of our day, and I found that my heart, though scarred, was beginning to heal. I took them to the local park, where the vibrant hues of autumn leaves and the crisp air whispered promises of new beginnings. "Dad, I love it when we go out together," my youngest remarked one chilly evening. And in that simple statement, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that I was now present for them in a way that I had never been before. My work and my role as a father gradually mended the parts of me that had long been bruised by Hannah's betrayal. While I rarely thought of her, except in the occasional news snippet about her rapidly crumbling influencer facade, I knew that every day I built a future based on truth, I was leaving her manipulations further behind. I enrolled in evening classes to update my technical skills and networked with colleagues who respected hard work and honesty. Slowly, my career began to flourish again, each new opportunity a testament to my resilience. One evening, after a particularly satisfying day at work, I sat by my small window watching the city lights flicker like distant promises. I allowed myself a rare moment of introspection. I made the right decision, I whispered, almost to myself. The journey from humiliation to healing had not been easy, but every step, every setback, and every small victory had reaffirmed that my life was now my own. My newfound independence was not about revenge or bitterness. It was about rediscovering the man I had always been beneath the weight of betrayal. With each sunrise, I felt stronger, more confident, and more determined to never again let anyone else dictate my worth. The sound of my children's laughter mingled with the distant hum of city life, and I knew that this fresh start was the beginning of a life defined not by the past, but by the promise of tomorrow. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.